Hi, I'm Aaliyah Woods, co-founder of CommonWealth Urban Farms, and this is our Beginning Gardener video series designed to help you have a successful garden even if you've never planted a seed in your life. This is our last video for the season, so we're going to kind of wrap it up with the garden, get it ready for winter, do a little more harvesting and one final planting. But first, let's take a look at the cover crop seed that we planted last week. Alright, so this is a little plot that we planted 9 days ago with cover crop seed to feed the soil. Over the winter time it will grow and stay low, and then in the spring it'll really take off. So you can see 9 days and already the rye is starting to germinate. That's this tall grass looking plant right there. And we've got some radish and mustard seeds coming up. Oh, there's one little pea seedling right there. It's just starting to germinate. We'll get more of those germinating soon. So it looks like we're going to have a good crop of cover crop seed here. Now let's harvest. We have lots to harvest this week. Some sun gold tomatoes. We've got all these shishito peppers that are still coming on. Very prolific crop this year. We've got some sweet peppers also. I'm going to give this another week or so and see if it turns red. I really like sweet peppers when they turn red. If it freezes, I'll be covering things or just going ahead and harvesting, depending on if it's a hard freeze or not. Some things like the arugula will take quite a bit of cold weather, especially if we cover them. Other things like peppers, once it gets down below 32, we're gonna lose them, so you might as well harvest before that. I'm gonna harvest some arugula for tonight for salad. Here's our Chinese cabbage, which is growing very nicely. I'm going to give it a little more time. It will take a light freeze, not super hard freeze. And we've got some radishes coming along here. You can see the red. A couple more weeks. Over here is the parsley and our purple basil. So the basil is done with. Even though we haven't had a freeze yet, basil just likes hot weather, and it's not happy when we get to this time of the year where the nights are down into the 40s or even upper 30s. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that back. Give the parsley more room to grow. And the little lettuce seeds that we planted a couple weeks ago, they didn't germinate, but I replanted, and so now you can see little tiny sprouts coming up here. Now lettuce is somewhat cold hardy, but it will not take a super hard freeze. So I'm going to cover these pots when we get into the colder weather. There's several things you can use to cover them. I like to use row cover. It's sometimes referred to by one of the brand names, Rime. So this is manufactured by many different places, available easily online. Sometimes the hardware store will carry it too. It's a spun polyester fabric. It will let light through and air and water through, but it will keep the plants several degrees warmer. You can get it in a heavier weight that will let less light through, but keep the plants quite a bit warmer. Or this lightweight 85% light transmission, and you can count on it for 2 or 3 degrees of frost protection. That doesn't sound like much, but it can make the difference between a plant freezing or not. And even more important, it creates a microclimate. So for instance, with the lettuce, when we have get into really cold weather, I'll cover this pot with the row cover. Either just drape it across it, put a few bricks around on the ground to keep it from blowing away, or I could do a little cage and cover it that way, give it a little more room, the plants a little more room. That will create a microclimate. Still, if it gets down to 25 degrees at night, it will freeze inside as well as outside, but the lettuce will stay warmer later in the evening. It will warm up earlier in the morning. It will be protected from wind, and it just astonishingly makes a much happier growing environment for the greens. Here's the broccoli over here. I want to show that too. That also will need protection if we get a freeze. So we have 2 broccoli plants here, and one of them is starting to head up. So there you can see the first beginning of that little broccoli head. Now it's very likely that we're going to have a hard freeze before these broccolis get big enough to harvest a full-sized head. So I will cover them with row cover, or if it's cold enough, I'll actually cover them with plastic. The plastic will give you more degrees of protection, but you have to remember to take it off in the morning as soon as the sun comes out and it starts to warm up, because the plastic will hold the heat in from the sun and it'll bake your plants even on a chilly day if it's really sunny. Here's the Swiss chard, which looks fantastic. This is just the kind of weather that Swiss chard loves. And I'm going to cook this tonight. I like to just saute it with onions, a little bit of balsamic vinegar. Recently I made a recipe called green shakshuka from the New York Times Cooking. Fantastic, highly recommend that. So I'm going to harvest a bunch of Swiss chard to make that dish tonight. And it'll just grow right back. I'm harvesting above the growing tip, so it'll just keep on sending out more stalks, more leaves. Again, Swiss chard is somewhat cold tolerant, but on a really hard freeze, covering it will make it a lot happier. And then let's come back to our sun gold tomato here. So the sun gold is still producing, but it's really slowing down. We're getting a lot less production than we were even 2 or 3 weeks ago. And some of the branches are dying back. So I'm going to go ahead and take it out because I want to plant something else here while I still have a chance. So I'm just going to cut off all the branches. I'll go ahead and pull the tomatoes off. Even some of the tomatoes that are green may ripen up, or we can just eat them as green tomatoes too. And then I'll pull the cage off. Okay, I trimmed back the tomato plant. I'm going to just pull off the cage. And we don't need this anymore either. All right, so here we have the pot with the old vine still in it. I'm just going to pull it out by the roots. This nice loose soil in the Smart Pot makes it really easy to pull out. Because now I want to plant something else in this pot for the winter. So there are a number of greens that you can grow all winter long outside and harvest all winter long, especially if you give them some protection. The row cover or plastic, or a cold frame, solar cone if you have something like that. So in this bed I'm going to plant kale now. I have some little kale seedlings that I started a month or so ago. Oops. So I'm going to set those right there. I'm going to add some compost to the top of that Smart Pot. Just lightly work it in. The soil is pretty dry. It's been super dry this last month. Everything needs water. Maybe we'll get some rain tonight. So these kale seedlings are planted in peat pots, which will decompose, except that they have the top edge is still sticking out. And so I don't want that to stick above the ground because that will lift moisture away from the root zone. So I'm going to peel off that top edge. And then I think I'm going to actually split these apart. So I'm growing these for baby kale. These are not going to be full-size plants with big leaves. If you wanted that, you want to just plant 1 or 2 plants in a pot this size. But I'm going to harvest these as baby leaves. So I'm going to just tuck that bunch of them in, and this bunch in there. I'm going to split this pot apart also. Tease those leaves apart. Plant some here and some here. Now, planting greens at this time of year, it's late October right now, they are not going to grow as quickly as if we had planted them, say, the first week of September. We have much shorter days, and the days are getting shorter yet, and of course colder weather. But we still we'll get some growth from them. Pretty much we have another maybe month of active, slower, but still active growth, and then things kind of hang out over the winter time, and they'll pick up again sometime in February when the days start to lengthen a little bit more. So I'm going to put some mulch around this, and then we will water it in thoroughly. So to harvest greens during the winter time, they will freeze at night when it's freezing outside or freezing during the day. The leaves will freeze, and you don't want to harvest them when the leaves are frozen. But as soon as it warms up enough that the leaves thaw out, then you can harvest them. Now let's water. And it's astounding how you can have leaves frozen and then thaw out, and freeze and thaw out, and the eating quality is still very good. In fact, with kale, it's actually better. The kale leaves are sweeter after they've gone through some cold weather. And again, although kale will survive very cold weather, it will grow better if you give it some protection like the row cover or plastic on cold nights. All right, and I'm going to come back later and do a little bit more watering. This is the sweet potato patch that we planted back early in the summer. And you can see the vines are looking kind of sad at this point. It's time to harvest them. So what we're going to do is just pull off the vines and then get to the roots, which are underground. I also just spotted some little tomatillos. These are called ground cherries, or this variety is called pineapple tomatillo, one of my most favorite plants. It has this little tiny berry inside that tastes kind of like a sweet sour, bit of those sweet sour candies that we ate when we were young. Really delicious. The plant itself is dying back now, but it has the little husk cherries that you harvest after they fall off. So I'm going to cut back some of the sweet potato vine. And now we can start to see where the sweet potatoes are growing underneath. So here's one patch of sweet potatoes right there. I like to use a garden fork to dig them up. You want to be careful because you don't want to put the garden fork right through the roots. So I'm going to come off a little bit to the side where I think there's no roots growing and come from underneath and kind of lift. There we go. Let's see what we got here. Yeah, there's one. That's a nice sized tuber right there. Nice. Any more there? Yep, and there's another one right there. And we'll push the vines back, cut them back. We've got some more. You can see where this vine is entering the ground. That's a sign that there's sweet potatoes growing right underneath. So we'll go ahead and harvest these all today. Then we want to cure them. Curing them does several things. One, it helps concentrate the starches into sugars so they taste sweeter. If you eat these right after you harvest them, they're not going to be as tasty as they'll be after they're cured. Curing also extends the shelf life so that you can store them for months and extend your eating pleasure. And then it will also help heal any nicks or bruises, even if you accidentally break one in half at some of those smaller joints. When you're harvesting, if you cure them properly, this will heal over and it won't lead to rot. So to cure them, you want to keep them for a week or two under very warm conditions. Ideally, you'd store them at 85 degrees at 85% humidity. Not very many of us have those conditions, but even if you store them at 70 or 75 degrees for a few weeks, that will help them cure and give you much better results long term. After they've cured, it's best to store them at 55 degrees, cool, dark place for long-term storage. And then I also wanted to point out our okra is now finished. The okra stopped producing a couple weeks ago. Here's the red okra here. And okra just likes hot weather, so this is not the kind of weather it likes, and it also prefers longer day length. So it's over with for the year. This concludes our Beginning Gardener video series for the year. Thank you for watching, and happy gardening.